My name is Sophia, and I want to tell you a story that changed the way I look at people, love, and trust. 2 years ago, my husband David and I moved to a quiet village. Life in the city had become too noisy, too stressful, and too fast. David worked online, and I wanted a simple, peaceful life close to nature. The village was surrounded by green hills, a river flowed nearby, and there was a forest that looked magical in the morning light. We thought this was the perfect place to build our future and maybe start a family. Everything seemed ideal. Soon after moving, we met our neighbors, Mark and Emily. They were about our age, and like us, they didn't have children yet. Mark worked in another town and was often away for weeks at a time. Emily was usually alone, and she seemed happy to have company. Naturally, we became friends. At first, it was lovely. We would go on picnics together, take long walks in the forest, and sometimes sit outside at night watching the stars. Life was simple, calm, and full of joy. But slowly, things began to change. The uneasy feeling. Emily started visiting us more often. At first, I didn't mind. She would come over with fresh bread or vegetables from her garden. She always said she was lonely when Mark was away, and I understood that. But then I noticed something strange. Emily began asking David for help with small things. At first, it was innocent, fixing a broken chair, moving heavy pots, or checking her garden fence. David is kind-hearted, and he never refuses to help. But soon, she started calling him more often, sometimes for the smallest reasons. One afternoon, I walked over to her house to see if David was still there. I found Emily standing very close to him while he was fixing her kitchen sink. She was smiling at him in a way that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something more. When we walked home, I asked David, "Why do you spend so much time at Emily's house?" He looked surprised. "She needs help, Sophia. Mark is gone most of the time. I don't see the harm." I nodded, but deep down, I felt uneasy. The suspicion. As days passed, I began noticing Emily's behavior more carefully. She started dressing differently whenever David was around. Instead of her usual simple clothes, she wore bright dresses, sometimes with makeup. She laughed loudly at David's jokes, touched his arm too casually, and always seemed too happy to see him. When we walked home, I asked David, "Why do you spend so much time at Emily's house?" He looked surprised. "She needs help, Sophia. Mark is gone most of the time. I don't see the harm." I nodded, but deep down, I felt uneasy. The suspicion. As days passed, I began noticing Emily's behavior more carefully. She started dressing differently whenever David was around. Instead of her usual simple clothes, she wore bright dresses, sometimes with makeup. She laughed loudly at David's jokes, touched his arm too casually, and always seemed too happy to see him. When she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling both relieved and worried. That night, I told David about her visit. He laughed and said, "You're imagining things. She's just being friendly." But I knew in my heart it wasn't just friendliness. The breaking point. Weeks passed. Emily tried less and less, maybe realizing David was avoiding her. But then, one day at the village store, she came up to me. "You know, Sophia," she said with a sly smile, "your husband is very helpful. I don't know what I'd do without him." Her tone made my blood run cold. I forced a polite smile. "Yes, he's a good man. I'm lucky." Emily leaned closer and whispered, "You really are. Don't let him slip away." For a moment, I wanted to scream at her, but I didn't. I simply walked away. That evening, I told David exactly what Emily had said. He became angry, not at me, but at her. "That's enough," he said firmly. "I'll make sure she understands." A week later, Mark returned from his job. Soon after, Emily stopped visiting us. She no longer called David for help. She barely even greeted us in the street. It was as if nothing had happened. Months later, Mark got a new job in the city, and they moved away. The day they left, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. David and I went back to our peaceful life. We started planning for our future again, long walks, gardening, and even talking about children. One evening, while watching the sunset, I turned to David and said, softly, "I'm sorry if I ever doubted you." He looked surprised. "Doubted me? Why?" I smiled. Because I love you, and I know you'd never hurt me. David took my hand and said, "You're the only one I'll ever love, Sophia. Don't forget that." And in that moment, I realized the most important lesson of all. Trust and communication are the strongest foundations of love. Without them, even the smallest shadow can destroy happiness. But with them, no one can break the bond between two hearts.